Welcome to the Doomscroll News Report here on Radio Taiwan International, where I, Hanna Belinsky, and my co-host,
Amanda Stevens,
two writers, political by necessity, cover some of the biggest international news stories dominating our news feeds from the last week. I'm Hanna Belinsky, and this week we're finally going to talk about what the deal is with United States President Donald Trump bombing those drug boats, something he's been doing for 2 months now that keeps intermittently flitting past among the lists of headlines I've been doom-scrolling through. I also want to talk about climate change and the massive hurricane that just hit Jamaica. How's it going, Amanda? I see that, unfortunately, you fell victim to your boyfriend's cold after all.
I did. I lasted for so long, and then this week it took me out. So
it was incubating.
It was
waiting to strike.
Honestly, I'm just glad to be where I am today, creaky as it is.
It's probably on its way out now.
Yeah, I feel like since I got COVID way back when, like I always now can feel when like the fever breaks, so to speak, or like when it's like done.
When it peaks. Yeah.
When it's like, we're done now. Like I get a status update. So that happened yesterday. And I was like, oh, I think I'm over it. But now I'm just trying to now I'm trying to get back up to 100%. So
sure.
I've been huffing a lot of mint tea recently.
'Tis the season for
I guess so.
icks and teas
so
on
and
so forth.
I thought you meant for mint.
Well, let's jump right into it. So, since early September 2025, the U.S. military has carried out a series of lethal strikes on vessels in the Caribbean Sea and the Eastern Pacific that the administration claims were being used for drug smuggling. So far, 14 strikes have been carried out on alleged drug smuggling vessels. According to Kanita Iyer reporting for CNN, the latest strike was launched against 4 boats in the Eastern Pacific this past Wednesday, killing 14 people and bringing the death toll from all of these operations to 61. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has publicly declared that the targets are, quote, known by our intelligence to be involved in illicit narcotics smuggling, unquote. The administration is framing the campaign as a matter of national defense, with Hegseth asserting that the U.S. is now in, quote, armed conflict, unquote, with drug trafficking organizations. He has compared the strikes to the war on terrorism. The administration has declared that it is in a non-international armed conflict with drug cartels and labeled them unlawful combatants. But this is all being done on pretty shaky legal grounds.
Mm-hmm.
The government has offered no detailed public evidence showing that the boats were definitively smuggling drugs or that the individuals targeted were lawful combatants rather than criminals.
Mm-hmm.
Legal experts and human rights organizations argue that these strikes may constitute extrajudicial killings because drug trafficking alone does not meet established criteria for an armed attack under international law. This from an article by Yashraj Sharma for Al Jazeera. And as for the U.S. itself, a number of senators, including some Republicans, have raised concerns that the strikes are being done without explicit authorization from Congress. Honestly, for all the legal controversy, it seems like just another thing in the long list of things they let Trump get away with that they never would have allowed any other president to get away with. But before I continue, I just want to get your take, Amanda, kind of generally on this whole ordeal.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's illegal for sure, right?
Yeah.
I mean, what I would say is I've seen a growing number of people concerned and curious about, around the question, I should say, are we going to war with Venezuela?
Yeah.
Because this is sort of an extension of, in the United States, there's, I forget the exact name of it, but it's like the War Powers Agreement, something like that, convention that states that if the president does not get approval from Congress and takes military action without that approval, which every single one of these has been.
Yeah, correct.
He has to stop, they have to stop that action 60 days. After 60 days. They cannot continue unless they get presidential approval. And that was intended, I believe, for like if a case like Pearl Harbor happens or something like that, where there's like immediate need for reaction and you may not be able to call Congress
to convene everybody,
get that approval so that you could do something immediately. But that deadline is 60 days. And when I was researching this earlier this week, I was listening to the co-editor-in-chief of Just Security and a senior fellow at NYU School of Law. She was talking about this exact thing, that there's not too much that we can do, but that deadline is coming up around November 4th.
Yeah, I was just about to say, it's almost been 60 days.
It's almost 60 days.
Yeah.
So he technically is allowed to order the military to do things right now, even though he does not have congressional approval. In terms of like, how legal is this by United States law? He is allowed to order that. Now, does that mean that these killings are illegal? Not necessarily, because as a growing number of Americans, including even some Republican senators, are saying the crime of extrajudicial killing is a higher crime, meaning in this case a worse crime than that of smuggling narcotics into the country.
Go figure.
Like, or at least on people's priority. Like, you can't be doing this, especially at this scale. Right. And the fact that a lot of these things are happening in international waters. The other thing I've heard is that it really kind of seems like perhaps this is more of Trump taking out a chip on his shoulder against Venezuela and Maduro,
you think
Venezuelan
so?
president, who was an enemy last time that he was president. And some people are even like...
It's just a grudge, you think?
I don't think it's just a grudge, but I think that definitely plays a part in it.
Okay.
He doesn't like Nicolas Maduro, and he let slip the CIA was doing ground operations in Venezuela. Is this all to like set the groundwork for like an attempted regime change?
Once again...
Did I set you up or did I pull you off course?
You kind of did, actually.
I don't know.
I was going to mention that what I was wondering, first and foremost, is whether the rest of the world is going to let him get away with it, particularly the Latin American countries like Venezuela, who are most impacted by the strikes. Per The Guardian, Colombian President Gustavo Petro called the operations murder, asserting that at least one strike killed a Colombian fisherman, not a trafficker. And he urged the U.S. to cease the attacks and respect the norms dictated by international law. And AP News says Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, who you just mentioned, has declared maximum preparedness in response to what he considers a bloody threat from the U.S. naval buildup and all these strikes that are happening off Venezuela's coast. It's not exactly like the U.S. has ever handled Latin American governments very well. Decades of interventionism. So do you think the attitude is not just like, I have a grudge, but also, whatever, the relationship is already bad, I can't make it any worse?
I think that the attitude is honestly America first, to the detriment of everybody else. To the detriment of everyone else. And however some of these politicians may try to frame that, I think that means like America's needs trump everybody else's needs worldwide, like, and wants and wills. And I also think that there is increasingly fragile legal precedent for this. There never really was legal precedent for this, but the more that is kind of like said as to this military action, which it is, and the longer that it keeps going, the more and more it seems like a precursor to war, because it's which sounds alarmist. I don't want to be alarmist, but like, you can't keep doing this as attacks on one country to another, and not even fully, because there was one Colombian who survived that the latest attack.
Yeah, that's right. There was
he was literally let go. He was sent back to his country after he was rescued, and prosecutors let him go because there wasn't even a firm enough case to bring him into court for drug trafficking.
You know, I wouldn't be surprised if once the 60 days are up, he just stops. You know, it seems like it's possible he's leveraging this gray area to just do as he pleases and kind of dominate or intimidate these Latin American countries that he...
Intimidate could be a good word to use. I guess where I was trying to go with that is that, like, Venezuela, he's using the excuse of fentanyl.
Yeah.
But Venezuela is not a source of fentanyl into the United States. And it is, in fact, one of the bigger ones is Colombia, which has been an ally of the United States for a long time. So the reason that they claim also doesn't make sense. So what makes more sense to me is what I was talking about earlier, what other people have said, that some of this is sort of just a a scapegoat
Yeah.
for their actions inside the United States. They've already
Okay.
blamed Venezuelan gangs like Tren de
Oh,
Aragua
that's true. Yeah.
on smuggling drugs.
Okay.
Now they are attacking Venezuelan fishing boats because that's the line that they have. Like, that's the line of logic that they've established already. In addition to the fact that Trump doesn't like Maduro.
Sure.
Whether this was on purpose at the beginning or just sort of a continuation of his aggression towards foreigners and who he sees as anti-American, which often ends up being people who aren't white, I think that he is focusing a lot of that aggression towards Venezuela.
That makes sense.
The last thing I would say on it is that you and I did mention this previously, but I think he prescribes to the dictatorial mindset of there are big countries and small countries. The small countries have to deal with what the big countries do, and that's just too bad. And unfortunately, the other countries that we've seen that share that mindset are China and Russia, and we've seen the effects of that mindset as well.
Certainly, one thing that's now been possibly irrevocably made worse is global warming. The goal of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, which was a key part of the Paris Agreement, is now widely considered no longer feasible in the near term. Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations, has stated that an overshoot of the 1.5 degrees Celsius threshold is now inevitable, and that humanity will surpass this limit in the coming years. Some analyses put the window at just 2 to 3 years at current emissions rates. Now it's about damage control. Instead of focusing on avoiding the 1.5 degree increase entirely, policymakers are talking about how to minimize the duration and the depth of the overshoot. Current climate pledges would only reduce global emissions by about 10% by 2035, which is just not going to cut it. This bit of news feels all the more harrowing considering how just this past Tuesday, a hurricane, Hurricane Melissa, rapidly grew into a Category 5 in the southern Caribbean Sea and hit Jamaica with record-breaking wind speeds. And after plowing through Jamaica, it weakened to a Category 3 and slammed Cuba. At least 30 people throughout the affected regions have died, and that number is likely to rise. Scientists say this is the fourth storm in the Atlantic this year to get as strong as Melissa did, as fast as it did, and this is a direct result of global warming. Not only were the ocean waters it passed over 1.4 degrees Celsius warmer than average for that location and time of year, but the overall warmer atmosphere can hold more moisture. So basically creating perfect conditions for the storm to suck up more water from the ocean and dump more rainfall than a similar storm would in a cooler climate. The higher sea levels make storms hit harder and flood areas faster too. Countries like the U.S., EU members, and other early industrializers are responsible for the bulk of greenhouse gas emissions over time. Do you think these nations are morally obligated to assist low-income nations that contributed very little to the problem and yet are disproportionately affected by storms like Melissa?
Yes.
100%.
I do.
Let's go.
I do. Well, it's also the idea to, this really quickly gets into a very economics heavy discussion, in my opinion, because I also think that a lot of these countries that are huge producers of CO2 that have contributed to climate change are also the ones who benefit from the resources of some of the hardest hit countries, right? Those natural resources being, for example, forests or mining, which often are damaging to local ecosystems. And using the example of like deforestation, that makes things like storms worse because it removes natural barriers that would slow it down. It also removes like drainage. It also heats up the earth. It also removes things that suck up
Makes
CO2.
everything worse.
Right. That's usually for economic reasons. So I do think that there is a moral obligation. A lot of my research on this topic actually was about how in the upcoming COP30, a lot of countries didn't submit proposals. They're supposed to submit proposals to lower their greenhouse gas footprint every 5 years.
What's going on?
A lot of countries did not, or they submitted proposals that people thought were unimpressive.
So
Right.
middling.
One of the biggest examples that I saw was that 30% of the greenhouse gases right now are contributed by China.
Yeah. Yep.
But in their plan, they only proposed a plan to cut greenhouse gases by like 7% in the next 5 years.
Well, that's not really going to help now, is it?
Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're only planning to do 5%. A lot of the research I was reading, and I was going through the Australian Broadcasting Corporation and The Guardian as well, and the BBC, said that the good news is that the world is on track to lower carbon emissions. They expect carbon emissions to peak and then soon go down,
Right.
but not nearly fast enough
Yeah.
to reach that 1.5 mark, which means that we're approaching a period where things are going to get really bad.
Yes.
But as a part of that, one of the things that may happen is countries like China, for example, is infamous for submitting a plan proposal that they know they can achieve so that they can vastly overachieve it.
Okay, that makes sense.
So it's not all doom and gloom.
It's a rhetorical trick.
Right. But it's not good. And
No kidding.
I do think that like the countries that are going to be most affected are not the countries who are really on the line here. And like the United States is one of those countries that didn't submit a proposal. Technically, we have Biden's proposal from 2024, which is what they're still using now. But Trump wants to remove the United States, which is the second biggest contributor of greenhouse gases, I believe,
Yep.
from the Paris Climate Agreement again, and just also allowed drilling in a Alaskan wildlife reserve. So
Yeah.
I don't think that those big countries are going to be, they're not going to be spared from climate events. China has been hit by a series of very damaging typhoons this
so
year
have we.
because we were dodging around them. And the United States is now seemingly constantly on fire.
And the U.S. saw some serious hurricane action too.
Yes.
Even just.
I mean, your example, like those are happening in the Atlantic Ocean, and a lot of those come up through Florida.
Yeah,
but
that's right.
Those larger countries have access to more resources to deal with those problems than smaller countries.
Correct.
And so to get back to your original question, I think that since a lot of the onus to fix that was on those larger countries who either dragged their feet or for other reasons were unable to meet those or unwilling to meet those, I think there is an international onus to assist the countries that don't have access to those resources but have to face the same consequences for them.
I agree. You know, we haven't really gotten the chance to talk about climate change at length on the show as much as I would like, but it is probably in my top 3 most cared about issues, right up there by my feminazi agenda.
I mean, in this we agree.
Yes. Because, I mean, we live here. We can't live anywhere else. This is the planet, and we can't afford to ruin it.
I mean, you have a son.
Yes.
He's going to have to live here after us.
Exactly. I need this place habitable, you know, for his sake. You know,
And our own.
if I don't survive, whatever. I probably would not survive apocalyptic conditions anyway. My vision is too bad. I can't stomach eating bugs for protein, and realistically, getting just one UTI without access to antibiotics, I would be cooked. It would be over. But the thing about news like this is it does unfortunately inspire a bit of fatalism about it all. You know, how can I, the little guy, the puny guy, do anything about a problem that is this big and wrought by, you know, whole nations? And it seemingly is so out of my hands. Amanda, you're from Seattle. Surely people are pretty environmentally conscious there. Can you speak to some ways that you have seen individuals and communities try to reduce emissions?
There are things that you can do individually that will lower your carbon footprint. And there's a huge caveat that you probably already know.
Oh, yeah. I had a baby. Yeah, sorry.
I have a huge caveat that I'm going to say in addition to this. It has nothing. It doesn't even have to do with the population.
Okay.
It doesn't even have to do with the population. Little man is fine.
I'll let him know.
On an individual level, you could start doing like small community farming. And if you live in a big city like I do or like we do now, that's still not out of reach for you. That sort of like lowers what you need to buy. You also can buy locally grown stuff if you have the money to do so.
I would
These
love
are
to
kind
do
of like
that.
financially things that may be out of reach to some people financially. Buying things that don't have to travel far, buying things that are in season, feeding yourself with food from in your nearby area is a great way to reduce that. As in addition to like, you know it, you love it, reduce, reuse, recycle, walk, if you can, take a bike, carpool. All of these things do help. Use composting. The best thing that you can do, though, is in addition to trying to reduce your own carbon footprint, put leverage on companies.
Pressure companies.
Because the biggest contributor to carbon and to like waste, and especially since we're discussing this climate change, so the CO2 footprint is large companies. They produce far more CO2 than everybody on an individual level could do within the space of a year. A lot of the times we can't necessarily do that individually, but what you can do is pressure people who can, and you can try to organize groups to put pressure on the companies directly, because a lot of these companies are commercial companies. So for example, Amazon, which is a big one in Seattle. And I don't know if we're successfully pressuring them because they kind of want to move out, but like that's been one thing that they've been doing. And some of those changes might be they end up switching to electric vehicles. Are electric vehicles the solution? Not necessarily, because it gets complicated.
Not
but
always.
Those kind of things can happen with enough commercial pressure. The other thing is like a lot of people, when you look at this, that fatalism might get in the way of believing things like boycotts don't work. But that's not actually true. And one of the places where we have seen boycotts working even within the last year has been on the Israel-Palestine issue and other issues related to that, which have forced companies to stop selling or stop supporting certain places. They forced companies out of countries entirely.
It's funny.
So
everyone is always talking about boycotting this company and that company. And I look at the list, you know, every time and I think, oh, maybe I can participate.
Yeah.
And I usually never buy anything from those companies anyway.
It's an easy thing to continue.
Just because I'm very much low consumption.
And I mean, and that's another thing you could do if we're looking for like ways to spread hope is like try to be as low consume as possible.
Yeah.
You know, thrifting and stuff like that helps.
Yeah. My biggest consumption is yarn, which I use to make clothes. So I don't even buy clothes.
You're producing for other people. Right. So there's a lot of things that we can do. The biggest thing is to try to pressure companies and also pressure lawmakers to do things like, I don't know, if you're in the United States, stay in the Paris Climate Agreement.
Yes.
There are people you can put pressure on. And I liked the research that I saw where it's not hopeless, but you do need to hold people's toes to the fire, so to speak, so that they stay on track.
Well, I think that's a good note to end on. That's it for today's news report. A quick reminder that you can find all of our referenced articles in the show notes for today's episode. I'm Hannah Belinsky.
I'm Amanda Stevens.
Thanks for joining us on air today. Tune in tomorrow for more programs by Radio Taiwan International. And in the meantime, remember to stop scrolling and touch grass. We'll see you next week. Bye.